Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we swim straight into the choppy waters of The Weaponized World Economy by Henry Farrell and Abraham Newman. Because, nothing says fun like global finance turning into a geopolitical street fight. So this foreign affairs piece lays out a pretty stark new reality. It explains how money, trade, and tech aren't just tools for growth anymore. Nope, they're blunt weapons, wielded by nations that have decided to turn the very pipes of globalization into an arsenal. So how in the world did we get here? Well, the authors argue that we've stumbled into a totally new kind of conflict, and it's all built around a concept they call weaponized interdependence. Okay, what does that actually mean? The idea is pretty simple, but it is incredibly powerful. All those global connections we spent decades building for trade and efficiency, well, they've created these central hubs, kind of like choke points. And whoever controls one of those choke points can basically turn a lever and squeeze other countries. Our biggest strengths have become our most dangerous vulnerabilities. And you can forget about tanks and missiles. The new arsenal is all about sanctions that can just boot a country from the global financial system. We're talking about export controls that can starve a tech company of the parts it needs to survive, and even attacks on supply chains that can grind an entire nation's industry to a halt. So, who wrote the playbook for this new kind of warfare? According to the authors, you have to look no further than the United States, which, kind of ironically, built the very systems it would later learn how to weaponize. After the Cold War, the global economy was really built on what the article calls the American stack. And when you think about it, it makes sense. Global finance runs on US dollar clearing and the SWIFT messaging system. Information flows through US-based internet platforms. And the absolute crown jewels of modern tech, semiconductor designs, were dominated by American intellectual property. Now, what's fascinating is seeing how this strategy grew up. It started out kind of small, post 9/11, using financial networks to hunt for terrorists. But then the US got bolder, expanding sanctions to lock entire countries like Iran out of the world economy. And then by 2019, it went all in, using export controls as a direct industrial weapon against China's tech giant Huawei. And this quote right here just captures the entire shift. What started out as a theory in an academic paper became a core part of American strategy. When officials wanted to go after Huawei, they grabbed this concept as a playbook, with one senior official apparently calling it a beautiful thing. But here's the thing about playbooks. Other people can read them too. The US may have been the first to play this game, but it sure wasn't going to be the last. And China, which was on the receiving end, turned out to be a very, very fast learner. China's countermove was incredibly swift. I mean, the Snowden leaks back in 2013 were a huge wake-up call about depending on US tech. But the Huawei sanctions in 2019, that was the real trigger. Almost overnight, China started to map out its own choke points and build the legal tools to fight back, like its 2020 export control law. And just like that, a new kind of arms race was born. It's become a tit-for-tat situation. For every US weapon, China has worked on a counter. The US controls semiconductor designs? Fine. China controls the processing tech for rare earth minerals, and you need those for literally everything from electric vehicles to your smartphone. The US dominates financial networks? Okay, China's building alternatives. It is a blow-for-blow fight. And let's be clear, this isn't just a theory. The article points to a real-world deal from June 2025, where the US reportedly had to ease up on chip restrictions because China was squeezing the US auto industry with its chokehold on rare earths. This proves it. China's leverage isn't just potential anymore. It's real, and it works. So, okay, we've got these two superpowers locked in a new kind of conflict. But what about everybody else? Well, let's look at Europe's big dilemma and what the authors call America's own self-inflicted wounds. So the article argues that Europe actually has some powerful choke points of its own. I mean, SWIFT is based in Belgium, and the Dutch company ASML is absolutely critical for making advanced chips. But the problem is, Europe just lacks the political unity to pull the trigger. Internal squabbling leads to what the source calls the EACO principle. Europe always chickens out. Meanwhile, the US is dealing with a very different problem: self-sabotage. The article uses this amazing metaphor, saying the Trump administration is like someone on a plane pulling random parts from the engine at 30,000 feet. It's gutting the very expertise it needs to navigate this new world, making policy more chaotic and less strategic. And you can actually see this institutional decay in the numbers. The National Security Council, which is supposed to coordinate all this, has reportedly seen its staff cut by more than half. The key departments in Treasury and Commerce that handle these weapons are also facing huge cuts,
Let's face it, you can't win a complex economic war when you fired all your strategists.
So, what's the big picture here? What does all of this mean for the rest of us? Well, the consequences are global, and they're leading to a fundamental reshaping of the world as we know it. The authors make a really chilling comparison. They say that these economic weapons are proliferating just like nuclear weapons did. And as more and more countries get their hands on these tools, the entire global system becomes more unstable, more dangerous, and way more unpredictable for everybody. And the way the US has been using these weapons, aggressively, sometimes chaotically, is actually undermining its own power. As Larry Summers warns, other countries are starting to look around and wonder if the US-led economic club is really the safest place to be anymore. They're starting to look for an exit. So here's the bottom line. The era of a single, interconnected global economy? Yeah, that might just be over. We're heading towards a fractured world of competing economic and tech blocks where every country is scrambling to build walls to protect itself from being squeezed by someone else's choke point.
And speaking of strategy, our producer FireflyHaku is the kind of mastermind who can make even tangled global finance sound almost fun. So hit subscribe, tell a friend, and come back next time. We promise more deep dives without the homework.